Hi, I'm George Lynch. I wanted to tell you about a new record I've got coming out. It's called Seamless. It's my first original all-instrumental guitar record. I've done other records that contain instrumental guitar pieces, but were not totally instrumental records. One being Sacred Groove in 1992, that also featured a lot of different tracks with vocalists and so forth. But this record is wall-to-wall instrumental, and I would have to say that it's an interesting record. It's not your typical guitar 80s legacy shred guitar record. It has elements of that for sure, but it's got a lot of variety on it, and it's a little bit challenging to listen to, meaning it's maybe not what you'd expect. So I think that I wanted to separate myself from the pack a little bit with this record and show some depth and some variety, and that makes for an enjoyable listen, I believe, and I hope you get a chance to check it out. I wanted to show you my touring pedal board, which is very small, and that makes it easy to travel, and I've got just the essentials on here. There's no fluff, nothing superfluous, just the basics. But everything else is right here on the floor. It's easy for my tech to plug in. I plug in here, and it comes out of the Framptone amp switcher. Now these were made by Robert Keeley back in the 90s and early 2000s. They're no longer made, but these are designed by Peter Frampton, and this is absolutely the best amp switcher I've ever used or heard. They're very hard to find, and they're pretty expensive, but they're isolated, and they have they're buffered, and they have transformers in every channel. You can also lift the ground on these things, and they have a phase switch, so in case you have out of phase amps, you can change the phase. But most importantly, they sound great. And that's the problem with a lot of switchers, is they're tone suckers. You plug them in, and they noticeably take something out. So take level out, they take gain out. I'm not willing to sacrifice that. The way some cheaper amp switchers get around that is they'll put a gain pot on there so you can artificially increase the gain, but that doesn't really put it back to where it was. In other words, the way you always check is the way I check is I A/B it. I'll unplug the switcher, I'll plug straight into the amp, I'll remember what that sounds like, then I plug in the switcher, plug back into the amp. It's not as good. Even if you turn the gain up, it's different, because it's a different kind of gain. So this is really transparent, this Framptone amp switcher. They also makes a 3-banger I have on my larger pedal board, where I can run 2 amps and a direct, let's say, or 3 amps, whatever you want. But this works for me live because I use just one amplifier. So the first pedal in the sequence is a Klon Centaur. This is the silver one, obviously, not the gold, not the Pegasus, but they're identical circuits. And these are, of course, very expensive, and you probably know the story behind Klon. But what these are is essentially an 808, a Tube Screamer 808, but it doesn't lose the low end. That's the simplest way to describe it. Now the 808 is my second pedal in line, and I'll use that instead of the Klon for certain things where I really want to tighten it up and I want a focused rhythm or a focused solo thing where I don't mind losing the low end. So I'm going to demonstrate that for you. Here's the amp. That's without the Klon. Hit the Klon. So you give up some dynamics, but you get more presence, and it just becomes a little bit bigger. Now I ran it, there's two ways to run the clones. The way I'm running this now is with the gain all the way off, so I'm bypassing the gain stage. Now if you run the gain stage up, that adds another whole level of push, you know, into the front end of your amp. So then you get more overdriven, more drive. You do lose a little low end when you do that though, and it's a little less dynamic. So then if I want to go old school, then I go tube screamer. So here's off. Here the note sort of goes away, and I like that because it's a little more dynamic, and for, you know, you're just kind of playing more subtle stuff, you don't want that on. But then when you want to go for a solo, it's more aggressive than the clone. So I use it for rhythms as well too, so if I want to do some rhythms that are a little heavier, you know. It's real good for tightening up the chunks and everything when you're playing driving kind of stuff. So the best tube screamer in my opinion is the very early, not the first year 808, but from the second year on. They have the Malaysian chip. That's the best, in my opinion, the best tube screamer. So the square button, you know, this old design, they're all a little bit different, but the Malaysian chip ones seem to be pretty consistent. The next thing on my board is this Radial Vienna Bones chorus, and what I like this is it has two different chorus settings. So, and you can use both of them at the same time. So they're both subtle on their own, and there's another option as well, and you can increase the effect by turning on this turbo button. So here's the normal setting. I'll go to a single pickup, a single coil pickup. Button, and I bring in the other chorus and it combines the two. It almost has a vibe kind of effect to it. So, to me, I use this radial pedal, chorus pedal, with both sides of the chorus on, but I'll leave it in normal mode when I want something subtle and kind of like a vibe effect, like a Robin Trower, you know. So that it kind of gives you that univibe effect, and it's subtle and it's kind of dreamy and it's cool. Then if I want something more intense, I put in the turbo. I switch to turbo, and if I'm doing like a rock song where I want, you know, real thick chorus, I'll go. Going on there. It's very complex. It's really cool. Sometimes I'll tend to throw it on for a solo, but just for a few notes, because it can really make it your notes indistinguishable if you use it too much. But I'll throw on the tube screamer here too and show you what I mean. So. great for sustained notes. It almost has like a real intense Frank Marino kind of vibe to it. It sounds like you're just throwing everything in but the kitchen sink when you run an overdrive and the radial on full blast with the turbo switch. So it's like woof. But it's great for sustained notes, not fast playing, because it'll muddy up the fast playing and all that kind of stuff. But if you're just holding a note, it adds like a tension thing to it because there's all this other cross stuff happening. So I like it for that. And then lastly, I've got my trusty old Phase 90. I have a few of these. These are the old mid-70s versions. So there's two varieties. The script logo is the rarest and the most expensive, but it's exactly the same circuit as the square logo. This is a square one. You can run these to kind of do what the Radial does in a much simpler sort of fashion. It's really nice. Of course, it's analog, it's old school. But what I tend to use it for, because I'll use the chorus to get that effect, and what I'll use the Radial chorus, what I'll do with this one is I'll run it all the way down till I get a real slow sweep. So it's a 90-degree sweep, but it does the sweep very slowly. So it does suck up some low end, but it's really cool for soloing when you're doing kind of faster, smoother kind of. Just kind of smooths it out, you know, because it's phase shifting, you know, as you're doing these kind of legato runs. So Eddie Van Halen used this a lot. It's kind of one of his main things. So this is an Exotic Effects Robotalk, and it's sort of an emulation of a talk box. So it reacts to how hard you play, and that opens the filter. So it's very touch sensitive. I have the preset to some song I was working on that I was actually used it on the Seamless record, and since the Seamless record is instrumental, doesn't have any vocals, I was trying to create parts where the guitar actually talked, and that's what I use this for. So. So it just opens and closes like a wah-wah pedal, but a little more interactive with what you're actually playing rather than what your foot's doing, you know, and opening and closing the wah. All right, what we have here is a ZFX Seek Trim. I've used this pedal for years, very sparingly, probably on every record I've ever done. It's very similar to an older pedal that I've also used quite a lot called a Seek Wah, which does a little different thing. The Seek Wah, obviously, as its name implies, emulates a wah-wah pedal, but you program the opening of the tone pot, essentially is what it is, but it's a whole bunch of little tone pots in a very specific time signature, time frame. So this one, what it is it gives you a choice of 4, 8, or 6. So that's your time signature, and you can actually hit that, and it'll give you the speed at which it'll rotate through all these pots, which are little gates really, and will open and close. So that's a random speed I just picked out of nowhere. So what I love about this pedal is I write with it. It's almost like a looper in a way. It would work kind of in the same way that someone would use a looper, in that they would build on something, a beat normally, or a chord pattern. But what I do is it's not as multi-dimensional as a looper. I can't stack tracks, but I'll get a random tempo going and play against it, and I'll come up with ideas based on that. So I use it as a writing tool as much as an effect on a record. What we have here is an original Clyde wah. These are incredibly rare and cool, and this is what the very first Clapton and Hendrix wah work would be. They would have used. They used Clyde wahs. That was the first thing that came out. So this pedal has some issues. It's very, very old, and you can't replace anything on it because they don't make the parts anymore. And once you replace them, they're kind of worthless and not what they originally were. You lose the magic. So it's noisy, and it works sometimes it doesn't, but it's really, really cool. So you know what a wah does, so there you a pedal that is really different than all these other pedals in a very distinct way is the whammy pedal, and it's become sort of ubiquitous now in rock and roll. Tom Morello obviously made it famous and used by just about everybody. Guys in Korn use it a lot, and it does a lot of different stuff. It does a chorusing effect that's really cool, but what it's mainly used for is its whammy effect, which is just like a wah-wah but more extreme. So there's a song on the record where I use it, where I do a little verse melody with it, which is and then if you leave it all the way down, see what we're getting here is an octave up. You can go 2 octaves up, which is really crazy. A little too high for human ears, I think, but it's fun to play with. So it'll drop all the way to the fundamental, and then you'll go. Then you can go down an octave, which is cool. What I'll do with that sometimes, if I want something real heavy, just like a big drone note, I'll do an overdub with this. So let's say a riff. Let's say you got a riff in a song. We also it'll do a chorus effect, which is pretty cool. Use your octave up and octave down. Again, it's very inspirational. You know, it's really more of a, I'll get a lot of ideas just playing with it. It also does a chorus thing, and it's just really fun to play with. They're relatively inexpensive, and you find them anywhere. And to me, it's a songwriting tool. This is a mid-70s Mutron Octavider. It gives you an octave above and below, or can give you an octave above and below, plus a ring modulator if you want it. The green ringer, they call it, and which gives it some randomness, which some people like. If you want a real steady octave, you keep the ringer off. If you want sort of just some random surprises, but with a little more anger and kind of cool stuff to it that's floating around. That is, you'll just get unexpected things happening. It's very random. Keep the ringer on. I like the ringer on. So this is what it does. It's very cool for low, heavy riffs. Yeah, it's really angry. It's just like a big freaking metal monster, just like, so I love it. And nothing does that like the Mutron. So this is one of my favorite pedals. This is a wonderful device. It's built by Hughes and Kettner. I don't believe it's made anymore. I think this is from the 90s. And it's called a rotosphere. And it emulates a rotating Leslie speaker, or Leslie type speaker that has that. Leslie speaker has a rotating horn and a speaker, and it's not something that most of us would actually use. You have to figure out how to make an amplifier head integrate with the speaker. Then how do you mic it? It weighs like 900 pounds. It's huge. Guitar players actually used to play through them. Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton used them a lot on a lot of records, very famous records, and they sound insane. But you can get very, very close to it, if not exactly like with this rotosphere. And it's the best Leslie emulation that I've ever used. So it also has a 12AX7 tube in it to give it an actual, tube analog preamp kind of effect. So here's the unaffected sound. I turned it on, what's really cool about this is in a real Leslie, you have a slider and you can slow the rate of the horn, the speed of the horn, and it'll gradually slow down and speed up. You can do that with this as well. So this is really cool. So it's on the slow setting right now. Slows down, speeds up gradually, which sounds very natural. Sounds like the real thing. It's a really, really cool unit. All right, this next pedal we've got is a Dunlop Octavio, and what this is an emulation of a Tycho Brahe Octavia, which is a very, very rare pedal and very, very expensive. You can find one, and you'd be lucky if they even work, but they're beautiful and unbelievably great sounding, and Hendrix made him famous. Hendrix used them in throughout his career, but as well, in Band of Gypsies, Machine Gun used an Octavia to great effect. What it is, it's a fuzz and a high octave, and they really work best playing up higher on the neck and with a single coil pickup. So this ESP Kamikaze has a single coil in the neck, and you really want to play it with the volume back down. So what people tend to want to do is, including myself, is you get excited and you want to turn the volume up and you want to go to your humbucking pickup in the bridge and then bridge, and it kind of destroys what the pedal is supposed to be doing. So you have to really be disciplined and keep the volume down. And it's very reactive. It's very reactive to how hard you're picking. So you'll hear. This is a really cool secret little weapon. This is called a Jordan boss tone. I bought this at the music store where I was taking guitar lessons in the 60s, and it was, I forget what it was. It was, it's a very inexpensive, and I still have the original box that it came in. Distributed by Gretsch, Cincinnati, Ohio. Jordan boss tone. There's 3 different versions of this made in 3 different cities. This is the one made in Nashville, Tennessee. There was a version made in Anaheim, and then there was somewhere else. I'm not sure what the third one was, but model 6248 boss tone. Really cool little thing. Real thick, harmonically rich distortion. It's got a 9-volt battery, which is tricky to change, and an on-off button, and 2 switches, which is volume and gain, and you just got to find your sweet spot. I haven't messed with it too much here. With my I've got the amp kind of backed off about halfway, so we'll just see what it sounds like with this setting. So here's the amp. Super fuzzy. Alright, I'm going to do my best Jimmy Page impression here. I'm not saying I practice this very much or anything, but I do own a violin bow, and it's rosined, and I just pulled it out just to do something interesting here. But what I'm plugged into is a Echoplex, and this is an EP3 version, so it's the first solid state version. EP1, EP2 are tube, and this is from the 70s, very early EP3, which in my opinion is the best sounding of the EP3s, is the early versions. So it's a tape echo, and the one thing I like about the Echoplex is, whether it's the tube or the early solid state, is that they have a preamp section that drives the amplifier and gives it a really good quality. It's hard to define and replicate that. There are pedals out there that pretend to do that, but nothing does it like an Echoplex. So even if you don't have the echo turned on, it still affects the sound of the amplifier in a very good way. It compresses it a little bit. But I have it set, I have the echo set for kind of a really long delay, so I can kind of mess with this bow thing here and see what Another device that I use a lot is it's called a hard driver, and it's similar to a Sustainiac, same effect. And what how this version operates is it has a dummy transducer in. Well, the transducer is in a dummy single coil pickup in the neck position. So this pickup isn't actually a pickup. It doesn't function as a pickup at all. It just looks like one. But so it's all built in. It's all on board. And the way you activate it is you have a potentiometer here that will increase the effect, right? And then you have a mini toggle that'll toggle between the treble ear or the bass ear effect. So the bass ear being more subtle. And these controls interact with your volume pedal too, or your volume knob. I'm sorry. So turn that up. Let's say we're in the bass. Then we start increasing the amount of the effect. And then switch to the treble. I just want to take a quick break here and take this opportunity to introduce you to a guitar that I personally make myself. I've been building these for 7-8 years. They're called Mr. Scary Guitars. I have my own shop. I used to work out of my house pretty much, and now I've actually got a shop that I just opened up last year. Very small, 2-man affair. But this version is called a Burnt Tiger. It's medium heavy Northern Ash, pretty much modeled after early Charvel, San Dimas designs, boogie bodies and necks and neck shapes, unfinished necks. I do this routing and this burning and this finishing myself. This is all nitrocellulose lacquer, stainless steel frets, my own hand wound pickups from Arcane. They're called Mr. Scary pickups. This is actually an ESP pickup. I bought the rest of these off of ESP, and I have a few left, and I put these in some of my guitars on a special basis if people request them. So they're very easy to play. The wide flat necks, and floating Floyd roses, and hand carved brass blocks. I have brass blocks, stone blocks. This is a traditional Floyd brass block, but I do an aftermarket brass block as well. And they're very simple and effective tone machines, and they're very easy to play. And I'll give you an example.